Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to be here today to share my story. My talk today is in 3 parts. I would like to spend the first 20 minutes speaking to you as a patient about how my body and my life fell apart after a diagnosis of stage 4 gallbladder cancer. Then I have a short video to change the tempo a bit before we talk about the healing power of walking and the 1,600-mile mission walk that restored my health and made me whole. When our bodies fall apart, our lives do too, and we are overcome with an overwhelming sense of fear and dread. My healthcare team, beautiful and dedicated people like every single one of you, helped me put the pieces back together. Knowing that I was not alone, knowing that together with my doctor and healthcare team that we could get through this made all the difference in the world and saved my life. Thank you for inviting me to share my story. Disease and calamity can hit us with terrifying intensity and with no warning. There's a vicious form of lightning that strikes when the sky appears blue and cloudless. It's called clear sky lightning. You know when you've been hit. Time stands still. From that moment on, your life will never, ever be the same again. The words, "You have cancer," strikes with the force of 3 bolts of clear sky lightning. In the instant that I first heard those words, my life fell apart. I was stunned, in shock, terrified. Fear can be deadly. Fear and despair can accelerate cancer's ability to kill. How can we let disease knock us down, but not knock us out? I am one of the luckiest people on the planet. Against all odds, I've survived 12 years with stage 4 gallbladder cancer, a cancer as lethal as liver and pancreatic. Along the way, I've learned there are 4 steps to restoring health and a sense of well-being. And I've learned how important the patient-doctor partnership is to every step. Awareness is the first step. It's when we are struck by that bolt from the blue. It is when we first hear the words, "You have cancer," or "Your elderly mother in a nursing home has coronavirus." What is happening to us is unlike anything we have faced in our lives. Have any of you been knocked to your knees by bad health, by bad news, by coronavirus? You're not alone in this. When our bodies and our lives fall apart, we are overcome with depression and anxiety, filled with an overwhelming sense of fear and dread. How do we put the pieces back together? How do we keep fear from killing us or robbing our lives of joy? When the thunderbolt hit me, I was 55 years old and arrogantly healthy. 2 of my children had just left for college. My husband and I had mortgaged our home to start a new business, and he was away from home working overseas with programmers. I didn't have a doctor. I had not stepped inside a doctor's office for 17 years since the birth of my children. I was alone with my 17-year-old daughter. The 2 of us had to use the internet to translate the obscure medical language on the PET CT scan report, language you will understand. Cancer was in my porta pottis, retroperitoneal, iliac chain, inguinal, subclavian, presacral, distal sigmoid, liver, and portal vein. I knew immediately that I had to kill the cancer before it killed me. But how? When we are hit with clear sky lightning, one of the biggest challenges is not letting fear trick us into giving up hope. It is necessary that we put the brakes on fear and stop ourselves from panicking and free-falling into depression and despair. Intuitively, my family and I knew we would have to become illness detectives and not leave one stone unturned, nor one avenue unexplored. To repudiate fear, I had to quiet my emotional brain and deal with what is. I had to understand everything about stage 4 gallbladder cancer. I had to get to the truth, to get the facts. I had to see it as it is, not worse than it is. Marie Curie was speaking to all of us when she said, "Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less." But medicine is a science of uncertainty and an art of probability, as Dr. William Oster, co-founder of Johns Hopkins Hospital, reminded us in 1890. Today, over 100 years later, medicine is still art and science. Indeed, 99% of cancer is still mystery. In seeking wellness, we must embrace mystery. Mystery is where hope resides. I quickly learned that stage 4 gallbladder cancer is incurable, and less than 2% of patients live 5 years. My cancer was so widespread that I was given a few months to live, and doctors compassionately recommended palliative care instead of treatment. After the initial shock of imminent death wore off, a tiny little voice inside of me said, "Who says so?" As the next to youngest of 12 children, I was used to questioning authority. As you can see from the diary I kept as a 10-year-old. Thank goodness for the inner child in us. An healthy attitude of healthy skepticism can be empowering and life-saving. I was raised on a cotton farm in rural Oklahoma by a mother who taught us we could do anything we set our minds to, even survive terminal, incurable cancer. With a few months to live, I had no time to delay, no time to waste on denial or self-pity. Cancer isn't personal. However, how we respond is. Getting the facts and understanding my cancer helped shift my focus away from fear. It helped me accept the reality of my situation. Acceptance is when we acknowledge that it is real, that we may die. Acceptance is not surrender. It is not giving up. Acceptance is letting go of fear, letting go and letting God. I wanted to live. With all my being, I wanted to live. I knew that doctors could not do it alone, nor could medicine. I knew that I was an essential part of my healing, and so were family, friends, and faith. Within 3 weeks of diagnosis, my life insurance policy paid an accelerated death benefit of 50% of the policy value. And that gave me the financial means, the money, to go anywhere and see any doctor. For more than a dozen years, I had paid for an affordable PPO catastrophic insurance policy, which allowed me to see any doctor in any network in any state. I can't stress enough how important it is for a patient to have the ability to choose their doctor. A sense of control, however small, is essential for healing. I was lucky to find Dr. George Fisher at Stanford Cancer Center. I didn't have an appointment, and I knew I could be dead in the 3 weeks it took to get one. Out of desperation, my husband, daughters, and I flew up to Stanford and waited 4 hours to see Dr. Fisher until he was finished seeing his scheduled patients. I always tell other patients that if your oncologist is always on time, get another doctor. Oncologists deal with dying patients every hour of every day, and someday, when your news is terrifying and you need your oncologist to be with you an hour, he will be there. My family and I knew within a few minutes of meeting Dr. Fisher that he was the right doctor. He came into the room, shook my husband's hand, hugged my daughters, and then wrapped his arm around my shoulder the the entire time. He spoke in a calm, quiet voice and was brutally honest. "I cannot cure you," he told me, "but I will treat you to the best of my ability and abide by your wishes, whether you want aggressive treatment or none." My fear immediately melted away. Why? Because I trusted Dr. Fisher. I've come to understand that the opposite of fear is trust. Trust is essential if we are to let go of fear, and letting go of fear is essential to healing. Trust in my healthcare team has been an essential part of my ability to let go of fear, which has empowered my will and strengthened my acceptance of uncertainty. I have come to have the deepest and most profound respect for my oncology team. Oncology specialists, doctors, nurses, technicians, and administrators are among the most kind and compassionate specialists. They hug and comfort us, and often they cry with us. I feel as loved by my doctors as by my family. In fact, after 12 years, my healthcare team is family. I also felt trust in choosing a comprehensive cancer care and research center, believing that as my metastatic cancer changes, cancer research will keep up and keep me alive. To stay in the game, we must stay alive. I know that the doctor-patient partnership must be an equal partnership. I must understand my disease. I must take responsibility for my health and treatment choices, and I must even keep track of my own medical records. I never leave a medical office without getting a copy of my doctor's orders, radiology reports, lab results, and I always schedule follow-up appointments right then and there. These 7 pages contain all my medical records. I can tell you every blood marker, every milligram of chemo, every CT scan result, every surgical detail, every radiation treatment, and every oncology appointment. 12 years of details, all on 7 pages. I take these 7 pages to every doctor appointment. Every doctor must be on the same page with me and my cancer team. And when another stage 4 cancer patient asks for help, I have all my medical data at my fingertips to share. With widespread cancer in many organs, I had one option: systemic chemotherapy. Having limited options is actually less stressful than having too many. As bad as chemo was, I knew that cancer was worse. Chemo might kill me, but cancer would kill me. As my weight began to plummet, I wanted to make sure that the dosage of chemo would not change. To tip the scales in my favor, I picked up rocks along the beach, put them in the pockets of my husband's oversized jacket, and wore his jacket with the rocks in the pocket to weigh in for chemotherapy. That's how much I wanted to live. I knew the only way to kill cancer before it killed me was to drown it out with chemo, burn it out with radiation, and cut it out with surgery. Through over 5 years of aggressive chemo, the challenge was how to kill the cancer without the chemo killing me. To survive massive doses of chemotherapy, I had to purge the chemo after every infusion. For about 48 hours after a chemo infusion, we experience a dextrose or a saline high from the chemicals the chemo is mixed with. For 48 hours afterwards, I drank enormous amounts of water, and while I still had the energy, I put on my headphones, headed to the canyon to walk and sweat out the cancer, listening to Elvis sing gospel, uplifting songs like "I've Got Confidence," "I Believe," "Walk with Me," "Walk On." I tried to feel the chemo killing the cancer. And I could feel every cell in my body tingle as music and sweat purged the chemo from my body. I firmly believe that the reason I am alive is because I have never stopped walking. Our bodies are healing machines, and the human body requires movement to do its job. From day one of cancer treatment, my mantra has been, if I can move, I'm not sick. Moving is wellness, and there's no better movement than walking. I am alive because of the healing power of walking and movement. My book, The Mission Walker, provides a personal narrative of the amazing healing power of walking and the power of belief. HarperCollins Thomas Nelson asked me to write the book after I wrote a series of articles in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. Walking has been called the closest thing we have to a miracle drug. But for me, walking is more than a miracle drug. It is a transcendental, physical, emotional, and spiritual experience. It's like dancing. If I can move, I'm not sick. That is my alternate reality, and I believe in all my will in that reality. So when cancer strikes, I believe that if I walk, I will live. If I stop, I might die. I would like to pause a few minutes and discuss the power of belief, a word that might make some scientists uncomfortable. And we can't talk about belief without talking about big data and evidence-based medicine. You see, all three are equally important. Evidence-based medicine is a good thing. It assures a standard treatment of care regardless of where we are treated. It can be a not-so-good thing if treatment options become forced and rigid. Evidence-based medicine is based on big data, and big data is what was, not what is. Mandy Davis, an executive at the American Society of Clinical Oncologists, recently tweeted, "Big data can hurt. Algorithms need to be able to account for the variety of human experiences." Amen. I feel strongly that big data and artificial intelligence are not as important nor as powerful as hope and belief. It is the mystery of disease that keeps the door open to healing and extended life. Big data and AI would have buried me years ago. Thankfully, my oncology team knows that medicine is art as well as science, and healing is often a mystery. Medical researchers study the power of belief. It's called the placebo effect. I call it mystery, and it's why I'm alive. Some call it luck. Some even call it a miracle. My doctor, Dr. George Fisher, is a scientist and researcher, and he doesn't believe in miracles. But he has admitted that my case comes close. Personally, I know I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet. I wish we had hours to discuss the science and research on the healing benefits of walking. Walking is so powerful, if the patients would take a walk instead of a pill, pharmacies would be out of business. It was Dr. Frieden who called walking the closest thing we have to a miracle drug. And this is just a partial list. Even Hippocrates believed that walking is the best medicine. And indeed, it is the most prescribed medicine in the world today. But walking is much more than medicine, more than a miracle drug. What I discovered is that movement not only assists healing, it also protects us against fear. If I can move, I'm not sick, and neither am I afraid. Walking elevates our soul. It elevated mine and allowed me to rise above sickness and death. Elevate what we must do to get through this. While we can't change external realities, we can change our inner state of being and find purpose and meaning and float above sickness and disease and transcend suffering. That's why I'm here today, not just to talk about science and medicine. I'm here to share with you something bigger than disease. I'm here to share the mystery of healing and how walking a 1,600-mile mission trail beginning 6 months after losing my right lung to cancer elevated my life with meaning and purpose and empowered me to face fear. I'm here to share with you the joy of walking, for joy is bigger than cancer, and joy is a lot more powerful than fear. Let's start with this short 3-minute video that tells the story of the 1,600-mile mission walk that began 6 months after lung surgery, a walk that restored my health and made me whole. Why would anyone walk a 1,600-mile mission trail a few months after lung surgery? One of my favorite philosophers, Mae West, would. It was Mae who said, "You only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough." More seriously, sometimes when things fall apart, we must do something really crazy to rise above it. It had taken me 6 years to subdue the cancer, including 79 rounds of chemotherapy, totaling 832,000 milligrams, numerous treatments with high-intensity radiation, and 4 radical surgeries involving the loss of 60% of my liver, 10 inches of colon, 2 inches of stomach, part of my throat, and finally, my right lung. In September 2012, when my husband and I drove the 500 miles from San Diego to Stanford for lung surgery, we took the scenic route, old historic Highway 101, and not the interstate. I immediately noticed the mission bells along the highway. There was a bell every mile. I was so grateful to be alive. I wanted to stop the car and hug every one of them. The California Mission Trail extends 800 miles from San Diego to Sonoma, north of San Francisco, and there are 21 Spanish missions over 250 years old. The trail is called El Camino Real, and it defines California. In 3 short months in 1769, every river, every creek, canyon, and mountain from San Diego to San Francisco was given its name, including Los Angeles. I had an overwhelming urge to walk the old El Camino Real to the missions and heal my broken body and restore my depleted spirit. On a cold, rainy day in 2013, less than 6 months after losing my right lung, I started walking for Mission San Diego. I had never walked more than 4 miles in my life, and I didn't know if I could walk more than a mile or more than a day. The El Camino Real along the West Coast has been called a Broadway of beauty, and from San Diego to Los Angeles, I felt as light as a dancer as I poured out all the clutter and as I disconnected from computers and from all the noise from social media and television. North of Los Angeles, the El Camino Real traverses 5 mountains, and as I walked up mountains, I almost passed out. My severed lung hurt, and it was hard to breathe. But cancer had taught me that when you think you can't go on, you can. I felt a primal urge to keep walking. Slowly, my body healed, became strong. As a walker, I was the smallest and least important person out there, and I was constantly avoiding danger from 18-wheelers, motorcycles, and bicycles. I became totally mindful. True mindfulness is freedom, and I became free from my emotional brain. It never felt like I was walking 800 miles. Instead, I was walking to 21 missions, and every 3 or 4 days I would reach a mission and be greeted by a Franciscan priest. And the priest would welcome me as pilgrims of all faiths have been welcomed for centuries, with healing prayers, food, water, and often a room in an old monastery. 50 days after leaving San Diego, I arrived in San Francisco, the city of St. Francis. I had walked 750 miles, and my spirit was soaring. I felt transcendent. For 50 days of walking, I had breathed with the rhythm of each step. My heart had beat in rhythm too. Peace in, cancer out. Grace in, cancer out. I had become a walking prayer. A couple of days later, I reached the last mission, Mission Sonoma. Inside the mission, a special surprise was waiting. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Sally Canfield Coupe, my roommate at Stanford Hospital. 7 months before, Sally and I had both had surgery to remove our lungs, and we shared a hospital room for 6 days and became friends. When I walked into that mission, Sally and I collapsed in each other's arms, laughing and crying, too overcome with emotion to speak. Just for a moment, we shared the most utter, complete joy that comes from simply being alive and filled with grace. We both knew why I had walked all those miles. I'd never felt so alive in my life as I did when walking the mission trail from San Diego to Sonoma. I never wanted to stop walking, even after 800 miles. I felt whole. But of course, I did stop walking. After the long walk, my lung capacity with one lung was almost normal. But life is always changing, our bodies too, and I would slowly lose some of my ability to breathe. And with the pressures and distractions of day-to-day life, I would lose the transcendence and spine-tingling lightness of being. And lightning would strike again. 2 years after my mission walk, in 2015, cancer returned, this time in my remaining left lung. I was lucky. It was one tumor, not a cluster of tumors. After the tumor was treated with high-intensity radiation, I wasn't about to hang around to see if more tumors erupted. I knew exactly what I needed to do to heal, to free myself of the fear of cancer coming back. I needed to finish my mission walk. Lucky for me, the old Spanish mission trail, the El Camino Real de las Californias, starts 800 miles south of the Mexican border. There were 17 old Jesuit missions, mostly ruins, between Loreto and San Diego. I had walked only half of the mission trail, and I wanted to walk the rest. I knew it was not going to be easy. In 1908, the American Geographical Society called Baja California, Mexico, the least known territory of the world outside the polar regions. A Jesuit missionary in 1767 was more descriptive. He called it a wretched, miserable place. Today, tourists flock to the beaches of Baja California, Mexico, but the interior, away from the beaches, is still wild and unknown. The old trail traverses 5 steep sierras made of lava rock as sharp as glass, and it goes through the Sonoran Desert, one of the hottest deserts on earth. In many places, the old Jesuit trail is buried underneath 300 years of cactus. But having stage 4 cancer is like living with a gun to your head. If I wanted to finish my mission walk, I knew I had to do it now. We think we have all the time in the world. We don't. I knew very little Spanish, but there was no time to learn more. My husband is a mountain climber, and he had a couple of old REI gear bags in the garage. I found an old tent in one of the bags, and I assembled it on my kitchen floor to make sure I knew how, and to make sure it wasn't missing any parts. Through the internet, I connected with a lady in Loreto, Mexico, who took tourists on overnight camping trips into the desert. It was October and off-season, So she promised me one of her pack mules for 10 days and a vaquero guide for 5 days. That was good enough for me. I was used to uncertainty after living with stage 4 cancer for 8 years. I knew I would need money to pay for mules and vaqueros and food. Where I was going in Mexico, there would be no credit cards, no ATMs, and no banks. Wells Fargo helped me get pesos, which I stuffed into the REI gear bags. A few months after radiation, a CT scan showed no new tumors in my remaining lung. I sprang into action. The next day, I loaded the REI gear bags in a taxi, crossed the border alone to Mexico, and caught a flight to Laredo. The old Jesuit El Camino Real was unmapped and unknown, except to the people who lived there in remote, roadless ranchos, people who had been there 300 years, since the beginning of the missions. I found 6 hand-drawn maps of the old mission trail in a book and tore them out and stuffed them in my pocket. There were no cell phones or telephones, and I rented a GPS satellite phone in case of an emergency. There would be no hospitals and no doctors, and no people for hundreds of miles through the desert and Sierras. Annie Johnson, Dr. Fisher's physician assistant, was an expert in wilderness medicine. She called CVS to order every prescription in Dr. Donner's Wilderness Survival Kit. And I used Google Translate to translate the dozens of bottles into Spanish. I carried more pills than pesos. It was impossible to know where I would be or when. I would sleep wherever I happened to be in late afternoon, before the sun went down and the desert became pitch black, freezing cold, and dangerous. I had learned with cancer that we can never be prepared, even for what we expect. This was true in the wilderness, too. You see, the wild is as unpredictable as cancer.
Probably it's easier for me to break my neck than for the mule to break its neck. We will see. We will see.
I took this video with a small Olympus Tough pocket camera around my neck. At the top of the mountain, it was too steep to walk. I sat down and slid to a ledge, almost 200 feet below, grabbing a cactus to stop from free falling. Just like cancer, the cactus was brutal, and what was lurking beneath was terrifying. There were rattlesnakes, giant centipedes, scorpions, and even mountain lions. As I got closer to the U.S. border, it wasn't wild creatures to fear, but wild men, narcos, evil men smuggling drugs and people into the United States. Luckily, I was never in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the vaqueros knew the desert and how to protect us. In the desert, you learn the real meaning of gratitude. When you have nothing, you are grateful for everything. You're grateful for the shade of a thin cactus plant. And in scorching desert heat, even tortillas turn green and moldy, but you eat them anyway. You learn quickly that there is something more dangerous than wild animals and wild men. The biggest threat is thirst. Water is essential. In the desert, you can die in 2 days without water. Every cup of water is cherished.
First time I've washed my face. First time I've washed my face in about 5 days.
What gets us through the desert, the cactus, and dangers? The same thing that carries us through cancer and disease and through fear. It is the same thing that will get us through coronavirus. Trust. Trust in people. Trust in God. Angels are everywhere. And when we are the most vulnerable is when we meet the most angels. We meet them in hospital ERs and in ICUs. Wherever there is sickness, there are angels. We meet them along the way, too. They seem to find us. I met angels everywhere in the desert wilderness of Mexico. Like Maria Luisa, who raised goats on a tiny rancho on the Mission Trail. It was just after 5 p.m. when I arrived at her rancho, and the desert was already pitch black. Maria Luisa had no electricity and had gone to bed. She got up and used a flashlight to boil water on a small propane burner to make coffee and tortillas. Later, after we had eaten, she motioned for me to follow her behind a curtain, where she slept on a bed of wooden planks on concrete blocks. Maria Luisa scooted over to make room for me and my sleeping bag. She wanted me to be safe that night from creepy, crawly desert things. 2 months after leaving Loreto, I finally arrived at the border. My GPS pings had recorded 972 miles. Pancho Duenas, my last vaquero guide, loaded up the mules to return to his rancho. It was Christmas Eve, and my husband picked me up at the Tijuana border crossing. Later, my husband and I walked together from the last mission in Mexico to Mission San Diego, where I had started my mission walk. And my mission walk was over. Or should I say, the California mission walk was over, for there are many, many more mission trails. When things fall apart, the final step is sharing. And it has been such a pleasure sharing with you the lessons I have learned about trust in people and in God, about belief in mystery, essential to healing in life, about joy, which allows us to transcend suffering and find peace. I would like to close today with 4 thoughts. Number 1, life is the greatest adventure there is. Number 2, we all die, but it's never, ever too late to live. Number 3, when we suffer the mightiest is when we feel God's presence the strongest. And number 4, sometimes when things fall apart, we must do something really, really crazy to rise above it. Now let's get out there and go for a walk.